Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Epay Tips and Changes webinar. This one's for the week of February the 1st. Now, this is the second of two webinars we offer every week, so let's get started. So as we run your Epay updates, we have a couple of topics that we want to cover today. First one being, let me bring it up on my screen. Well, first off, keep in mind that everyone is muted, so if you have any questions, please use that GoToWebinar question area of the control panel. That is one of the key things to keep in mind here. A lot of good questions have been asked, and I want to make sure that everyone's questions do get answered. So just use that little question area there on your control panel, and we'll be able to answer the questions as needed throughout the call today. So as I just said, as we ready for Epay update, we do have a couple of topics we want to talk about today, specifically these on the screen. We're going to start off today with a discussion on granular security changes. Basically, these two items that you have access to doing yourself now. So one of the items is Autosplit, and that's a cool little function that allows you to basically spread out an employee's time. So they clock in, clock out, but you want to allocate that to multiple jobs. This is the way we do it using Autosplit. So we'll talk to that point first. Also go into personal time off balances. To give you a quick overview of that process that's there that you have access to doing now and its benefit in the system. Then we're going to wrap up with just a general work order process discussion. Basically, what are work orders for those that may not know or deal with work orders on a day-to-day basis. Then also talk about how they're set up and how they become visible in brute force. There's been a lot of issues in the field with these work orders, so we want to just make sure everyone's on the same page. Now, as we talk to the first topic today, which is going to be the Autosplit, one of the things I want to point to your attention is on your control panel. If you have it minimized, go ahead and open it up so you can see it. On that control panel, at the bottom, part of that control panel, there is a section called Handouts, and I put a handout out there in regards to this piece of using Autosplit. So kind of the process I'm going to go through here on slides and actually demo it live for you are detailed there in that document. So you have that for your reference. So should you ever want to set up Autosplit in the future or go and make edits to your existing Autosplit that we may have set up for you, that document will assist you with that. So let's get started with Autosplit. So the very first thing is the question I always get is, what is Autosplit? What's the purpose? How's it going to help me? Well, first off, Autosplit is basically a function in brute force. It's going to allow you to set up the brute force record to basically take total time that the employee works and automatically split that time amongst multiple jobs. Now, every time record in the system, if you go to your time card, and I'll show you this in a little bit, each time card record has a regular option called split. That's something that you do manually. Autosplit's actually set up on the employee profile, and this split is going to be based on percentages, not hours. So you can actually tell the system, in this case, it shows here on the screen, if someone can work multiple jobs. In this case, this employee works 3 different jobs. Now, for whatever reason, the employee can only clock in and clock out. Maybe not have the capability to clock in and out of some of these other jobs he works. So what we do is we take the total time that the employee has accumulated for that day, or for that day, clocking in, clocking out, and the system will come back in here via the Autosplit and split that time accordingly based on those percentages. So if an employee punches in at one of the jobs at, say, 5 p.m., or in this case, 6 p.m., sorry, on the example, and then clocks out at 10 p.m., so he has 4 hours, the system was going to go based off whatever we told the employee record to split on. So on the employee record, we've gone in, we've set up this Autosplit functionality, and we tell the system job A, do 25% of the employee's time there. Job B, do 25% of the job time there as well. And then wrap it up on the third job, the job C, put 50% of the time. And based on the total time, in this case it's a simple 4 hours easily, it's going to break it out into those increments. 1 hour, job A, 1 hour, job B, 2 hours, job C. And this automatically does it based on percentages. Now the question I always get is, why can it not be hours? I want it by hours. Well, it's very simple. One of the criteria here, and we'll talk about this, I'll say this again in a little bit, one of the criteria of Autosplit is to have the employee punch in and punch out. If an employee were to punch in late, and punch out early, and let's say for the sake of this example on the screen, only accumulates 3.75 hours, there's no way we can tell the system 1 hour, and 2 hours automatically because there's not enough hours accumulated. That is why it has to be by percentage. So the system will break it out on percentage as you would like. Now, it's a very simple setup, and I'll go into Blueforce and demo this a little bit. But the process of Autosplit, you go to the employee record. There is a tab on that employee record called Autosplit. You basically will have the option to click on that, and at which point you can then create the Autosplit breakout, however you like. My example is shown here where I have 3 days of the week, and this employee actually happens to work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, the same 3 jobs all the time. Now, one of the beauties of Autosplit here, just so you know, is that, look at Friday's time here. I'm going to circle it here, and I circled it in gray. That Autosplit, let me go ahead and circle it again in a different color in case you can't see it on your screen. But regardless, one of the things about Autosplit here, to keep in mind, is that on Friday, you notice here that he doesn't work all 3 jobs. He only works on 2 jobs. You basically have the flexibility of breaking out the Autosplit on the given day and how you want the system to react or to respond to those the total time the employee works. Now, keeping that in mind as well, the criteria here, I'm going to advance my slide here so we can go to the next screen. The criteria is very simple for Autosplit. The employee must punch in to one of the jobs set up on his or her Autosplit record. So in saying that, let me go back one screen. The employee has these 3 jobs, as you see on this particular example set up. He has these 3 jobs right here. If the employee goes into one of these job sites and clocks in for the day, and then goes in at the end of the day just simply clocks out, as long as it clocks into one of these jobs, the Autosplit will take over. So let's say that on Friday, tomorrow on Friday, you go and send off one of these employees to cover an employee all day at another location that this employee normally doesn't have and obviously isn't part of the auto shift, the auto split. If that employee punches into that job that's not part of this auto split, the system's going to say, take that job and put all the time on that job that he clocked into because it's not part of this auto split. The auto split works perfect for all those on this phone call that have the route employees that always work the same route, go to site to site to site, and may not have the capability of punching in and punching out. And it also works basically for anybody who has the same job schedules. Basically, they work the same jobs all the time. Like I mentioned, if they work at any other job and say don't work these 3 jobs on Thursday, and instead they work another handful of jobs or just one other job altogether, the system will not follow the Autosplit rule at that point because they did not punch into one of these jobs. So a couple of questions have come through thus far, and I'll get to those momentarily. Let me just finish off this one topic, and then we'll move on. So let's go back to the criteria. So the employee must punch in and punch out. So this is not something you automatically key in and have the system do. It doesn't work that way. The employee must still record his in and out punch. That's the ultimate goal here in the system. The employee should always be recording their own punches. Autosplit must be set to active. There is a flag that says it's active. And at any point, you can turn that off. If you don't want it to run, today, going forward, you want to leave everything set up in there. You don't have to go and delete everything out. Just simply uncheck that flag that's labeled is active, and I'll show you that here momentarily. Also, the Autosplit record must be built on percentages. Remember, not hours. It has to be on percentages. So a couple questions. Can work orders be performed can the split be used for work orders performed at the job? Unfortunately, the Autosplit looks at the job itself. There is no capability of going in there and building the work orders around that. Since typically work orders aren't always a kind of a common occurrence that the employee's always going to be working on those on a day-to-day basis. So that's why, from Epay's perspective, they've only set it up at the job level. So unfortunately, no work orders can be set up. And then can an employee punch into one job and punch out at another to do an auto split? By all means, yes. The criteria is the employee has to punch into one of the jobs that's listed on the auto split, and then the employee can work. Like in my example here, I have three different jobs. He can clock in at one of those jobs, clock out at another one of those. And as long as he's clocked in at one of the jobs that's listed on that record, the system knows to auto-split the time. So yes, by all means, you can clock in at one and clock out at another. So before we go any further, let me go ahead and show you a couple of things here on the screen so we can actually go through and kind of demo this auto-split. All right, so here is Blue Force. And let me log in here. So essentially, auto-split is a very simple function to set up. The criteria, just keep in mind, the employee still has to punch in and punch out. But at the same time, we want to make sure that the employee is it's also set up to work those jobs that he needs to get to as part of his auto-split. So what I mean by that is, let's go over here to the employee record first. And when we go to the employee record, I'm going to pick an employee that I want to use, and I can pick Edward. Edward is our guinea pig all the time, and I'll show you on his auto-split that we have right now. It's just all blank, and this auto-split at the bottom of the screen is basically, you'll see there's a couple of functionalities that you need to be done. When you go to the auto-split tab, the first thing that you'll want to do is always click on Add New, and Add New is going to give you the flexibility to go and add a new line for an auto-split job. Now when I click on Add New, the first thing I'll have to be prompted for is a drop-down for job. I get to pick from the listing of jobs that Edward may want to work as far as auto-split. Now one of the questions we always get here is, I'm looking for a job. It's not on the list here. It should be, it's in the system. I don't know why it would not be pulling up here for Edward. Well, as I was mentioning, the employee has to be set up to be able to work those jobs. So before I go any further with auto-split, I'm going to take a step back over here to working jobs. And this working job tab, one of the things you'll notice here is you have the kind of a listing on the right-hand side here of assigned jobs. If the employee's job is not in here, in this little box on the assigned job side of it, is in the job you're looking for is not in that listing, that means that employee currently does not have that job available to his working job, so we'll have to add that. So one of the things, and I won't go through the little process here of adding jobs, but one of the things we covered on last week's webinar is we went over here, we looked on the unassigned section, and then went ahead and looked for that job, clicked the assign, and it brought it over to the right-hand side. So that's how you would assign the working jobs to that employee. Now, once you actually have the working jobs in place, then you can go back to that particular auto-split and build those auto-split lines as needed. So first thing is I'm going to go in here, pick a job, and I'm going to say he's going to work at US Airways. Next, you have to pick a task, and these are all the tasks that are available on that job. So it could vary. Obviously, for those that are on the call that are in a cleaning job, you're going to see these cleaning tasks. If you're on a landscape job, you're going to have a landscape task. Engineering jobs and so forth are all going to have different tasks. Tasks become important because the tasks drive the GL coding that goes back to JDE at time of payroll. So make sure that you pick the correct task that you want this employee to show up under. Now I picked the job and task. Then every day of the week here, I have the opportunity right now, it just shows 0, but I can tell the system, these are the days that I want to use for one, and also the percentage of time on those days that I actually want to split it for this employee. So let's say this employee is going to work this 4 hours every day. He works in the evenings. He has 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 different job sites. Let's say on Monday I want 25% of this employee's time to go to this job. So what we're told the system here is on Monday, 25% of his total time worked will go to US Airways job. Let's say he does this job on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday only. So I'll do those 3 days. And then one of the things you have to do is once you finish the line, there are 2 saves. You see one here at the bottom. You also see one over here to the far left. Be sure that you use the one to the far left to save the work on that line. If you don't click on this save and you accidentally click on this other save at the bottom first, you're going to lose your work. So just keep that in mind. You always have to do the one on that line, the given line. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back, hit save. And once I hit save, you notice the screen changes. It goes to an edit delete option. The edit delete option now on that particular line now gives you the opportunity to go in and make some edits to that particular line. Maybe you want to change the percentages or move to different days or add more days, whatever it may be. You already can also delete it. If you ever want to remove it, the simple delete will work. And once you finish there, the next step would be is to go up here and click on Add Row again to continue your auto split setup. Now keep in mind, only total 25% so far. Each of the days that you use have to total going down to 100%. You'll see a total screen here momentarily where it says save successfully is gray, it only says 25%. This total line really needs to say 100%. So it's going to be all these right in here. Okay. If we go and proceed with trying to do an auto split setup and make it active with anything less than 100%, you're going to get some nasty messages. So this FYI, I should total to 100%. So let me go here. I'm going to go now and click on Add Row. And Add Row is right at the top left-hand corner of this grid, right here in the blue. It's kind of in a white text, kind of makes it hidden and really hard to see, but that's where you would find them. So once I go in there, I can now go in and now Add Row. And I'll pick my next job that he's going to work at. Same thing, pick a task, and then tell the system what days or what percentages you want to go to. Well, Avis, we have a contract that's a 5-day-a-week contract, Monday through Friday. So this employee is going to work 5 days a week on this job. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, he's only going to be there for 25% of his time. But on Tuesday and Thursday, let's say he's going to work 50% of his time is going to go there. He's going to work at this job a little longer. So same thing, I hit save. Notice I have a couple columns that all the columns are now equal 50%, which is perfectly fine. So I need to add another row, and let's pick a different job. And let's say this time he's going to work over at Broadway Medical. Same thing, he's a custodian. I'll find that off the list. And he's going to work the rest of his time. It's a big job, so 50% on Monday, 50% on Tuesday, 50% Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Hit save. And you'll notice that all the columns now will total to 100%. Now, once you have verified that everything is showing as 100%, and obviously zeros if you don't use that day of the week, like Saturday and Sunday here, come down to the bottom and actually hit save at that point. Now, one of the things you can do is save the work is I got to activate the auto split. So if you want to save you an extra click before you do the save at the bottom, make sure your is active box is checked. And that essentially tells the system that I now basically want this auto split to now start running for this employee. So the next time this employee punches in to one of these 3 jobs, the system will automatically know that it actually goes to an auto split. Okay? Now, if there's an employee that's going to work the same job and only works one job, there really is no need for an auto split. This is simply something set up for a scenario of multiple jobs. If the employee only works one job, there's no reason to split anything because their employee is going to punch in and punch out at that one job. If the employee is working 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 different jobs in a day, then auto split makes sense to use. So keep that in mind. I just brought that up because that was a question that was just asked. So at this point, I'm done with auto split. I hit save, and the employee is now ready to start accumulating his time and automatically split out just like this. Now, from a time card view, the way this split will work is the auto split, first off, is perfectly legal. It's perfectly okay to do an auto split. The key theme here is from a Department of Labor and also from a HR kind of perspective here at ISS, the time in and time out captured by the employee is their authentication that they were on the clock, they were working. The auto split is just redistributing or allocating their time to the proper job. So we're not breaking any rules or making any labor violations here. So everything's perfectly on the up and up with this auto split. Now the other functionality that's out there is the split. I'm just going to bring that up real quick so you can kind of see what that looks like for those that do not know. And I'll discuss the Autosplit in a future webinar. I won't go through the whole process today. But just so everyone knows, it's on the Autosplit. When I go to a time card view, the Autosplit, so the regular split, is found just right here by clicking the little arrow. Actually, you can use that one right here. So when I click a little arrow on View Details, there's an option for Split Time Card. Same functionality, but splitting the time card this route is a manual way of doing this. So if you can set up the Autosplit, let the system do all that work for you. One of the things you'll notice in the system is the in and out punches will be perfectly fine, but the split punches may show up in yellow on the screen, which just says that there were created punches. There were punches that were created by some other means than the employee. And that's perfectly fine, and we see it on the screen. From an audit perspective, that's perfectly fine. From a metrics perspective, from those reports that we've been sending out, kind of going through and seeing some audit risks and whatnot, all that's going to be perfectly fine as well. So keep in mind, use a split or use obviously the auto split that I've been showing here when possible. So that is kind of the auto split functionality that I wanted to show you on this call, just so everyone gets familiar with some of the other offerings and options we have out there in BlueForce. Let me go ahead and minimize this, and let's get back to our slideshow. All right, so the next thing I want to go through is the PTO setup in the system. One of the things about PTO in BlueForce is that you can actually track all that automatically. And there's nothing you have to do out of the ordinary. The system automatically is doing that for you now, and many don't realize that. So first off, what is PTO? This is an abbreviation for personal time off. This function is available on the employee's profile and allows you to track the amount of PTO that has been allocated to the employee via like an annual balance. So vacation, 40 hours, 80 hours, whatever it may be. And then you also track how much has been taken or used by that employee. So one of the things about this is the employee record has this PTO tab that's going to be populating this information for you regardless. So if you go to any of your employees right now, you can go in there and see all the PTO that has been coded to their time and show how much time has been taken in the system. So one of the things you can do is you can actually go in there and set up an effective date and tell the system on this day I have, as of this date, there's 40 hours in the bucket for PTO, specifically for vacation, specifically for sick, wherever it may be, and then you can always edit the balance if you need to. So that's another beauty of this system. Now, one thing I will bring up is, a couple of weeks ago in a webinar was a question about the new PTO policy as part of the employee handbook. Now, one of the things, if we read into that, the PTO policies are pretty much the same for the hourly employees out in the field, so there's not much there to worry about. The changes that are occurring where there's one big bucket for PTO, where we no longer have to break it out, that is really limited to the exempt employees, the salaried employees. Most of us on this phone call would fall under that bucket. So you may or may not necessarily need to worry about that this piece when it comes to this. We're focused right now on this tracking of PTO. Is basically for any employee that's in BlueForce that's actually using the system to track their time. So that's kind of the intro for the PTO. Now, one of the things you'll notice is, so I'll go here and demo this momentarily, but one of the things you can go into the record and see is when you go to this tab called Personal Time Off, you will see a couple sections. The first section is going to be PTO Balances, and PTO Balances is basically the area where you can actually see what they've actually used. So the first column, called Used, will show you the amount of time they've used, basically how much time has been coded to their employee time card or time sheet. And then also see the balance. And sometimes, notice here, I put notice negative. If it has a negative balance, it's just saying that we never had a starting balance to start with. So the starting balance was 0, so instead of doing anything, somebody doing anything other than deducting from 0. So that's perfectly normal. In most of your employees, when you go out there, it's going to look exactly like this. You're going to see used with a positive number. The balance is going to have a negative number. That's perfectly fine the way it's set up right now. So that's the PTO balance section. You can kind of go through there, and I'll explain this in a little bit more detail when I do a live demo. Now from there, you can actually go over to the next section, which is PTO history, and you can see the whole history behind of when the PTO was entered, what type was used, how many hours were used, and then how it was entered into Blueforce. Was it by the time card? Was it done by the timesheet view? Was it done by some other means of the system, an import? Was it done by PTO request in the system? There's a couple of different ways it can get in, and they'll all be listed here under source. So that's PTO history. So right now, if you go to any of your employees that may, for most of us on the call, we've been on just about a year, almost a year, if maybe shy of that. But throughout that year, anytime a PTO scenario was used, it got tracked here. So you can go into that employees right now and see that information still being accumulated as we speak. Now the other section, granular security changes, part of this as well is the allocate PTO at the very bottom of the screen. We can actually now go in and allocate PTO by entering for a future effective date, or we can actually go at the top of the screen there and go ahead and enter a balance using the existing effective date. So if I want to go in there and just add some hours to the information that's already there, I can do that as well. Now typically these actually are, this is probably a good time to talk about this granular security because change that would be made about 3 weeks ago, and this piece of allocating PTO, because since we're still close to the beginning of the year, that we can actually load balances for anybody that's interested in doing so for your jobs. So one of the ways, the third way of getting time in the system, if you don't want to do this manually and you have a lot of employees from a balance standpoint beginning of the year, you could actually go in and we could do a mass load of PTO balances for you. What this basically entails is you requesting that via help desk ticket. We will go in and send you a Excel spreadsheet which will look very similar to the format down below. And we just need it filled out. We will need to know the payroll ID, which is the employee number. We will need to know the rate type, which would be the, whatever rate you want to, PTO rate type you want to use. So you could be 40 for vacation, 45 sick leave, 50 vacation, 50 holiday start, and so forth. We need to know how many hours you want to put as a balance to that particular type of PTO for that employee. Then we'll have to know what's the start date or what is the effective date initially, when do we want to get this kicked off. And then end date we don't really care about, but if you have a cutoff point, we could put that in there as well. So there are quite a few different ones. And one of the questions is, what is the rate type for holiday non-work? I don't know that offhand, but that could be used as well on the list here. So if you're ever in doubt of a rate type that you want to use, you can just get with either Tian or myself. We can provide that information for you, or you can kind of peruse in the system to get that information as well. But once we get that the spreadsheet back from you, we can actually upload it, and you will have all your balances in the system ready to go. So let me do this. Let me go back. I'm going to back out of here. I'm going to go back into Blueforce, and I do see some questions here, and I'll address those as we go through our little demo here. So over here on the employee section, so I'm going to pull up my employee again. I'm going to pull up Edward. Let me get that screen refreshed. There we go. So I'm going to pick on Edward here. I'm going to go back down to the bottom of the screen to the Autosplit tab. And on that Autosplit tab, not Autosplit, I'm sorry, I'm going back, a step back here. Go back to the Personal Time Off tab. You'll notice that you'll see all the accumulation for Edward here. And you'll notice that you'll have the PTO balance section at the top. These are always balances that the system has them right now. The PTO history, which shows you all of the history behind those punches. And then you have the option to allocate the PTO down at the bottom as well. Now, one of the questions I got a little while ago is what happens to all the sick time that has been accumulated to date? Well, one of the things about that is any time that's been accumulated in the system is in JD Edwards, but it's not in Blueforce. That is something, and even at that, some of the totals, I hate to say that unless you've been up to date and kind of keeping track and coding everything correctly, some of those totals in JDE probably aren't correct either. So there's no way of us using that data. So if you want to start your balances fresh, if you know there's been accrued tick time, whatever it may be, and you want to load up here as a balance, you can do that. You can bring that information. We can load it for you, or you can do it manually. So another question was, can you generate a report for all the PTO for each employee or all employees? There is really no report right now that's set out of Blue Force. I mean, that's something that could be requested, or we can actually go in and possibly create for you. But as of right now, there is no report that kind of gives you a balance for all of your employees together. So kind of like look at the screen, kind of just explain what's going to happen is if you go to any reports, like I mentioned, you're going to see possibly like the first line here, vacation, that right now has a used balance of 41, used a 41, and a balance of negative 41, effective 7/15/15. So what that basically is telling you is if we've never gone in here and loaded balances for you, the system automatically makes the effective from date the first date that the vacation was used or coded to the employee. So when that's actually done, you may not have anything that's been part of the balance. So you may see a 8 hours vacation used with a negative 8 balance the first time you go in here and look at this. And that's, once again, is perfectly fine because that's how the system is set up to do. Now, what you can do to bring these balances and the used hours and balance in up to date, you can simply go over here to that particular line, click Edit, and when you click on Edit, what's going to happen to you to the screen is that you're going to see a option or the field is going to open up to basically allocate hours. So in this case, if I wanted to allocate 40 hours of vacation for this employee, I could click Save. The effective date will stay the same, but you'll notice now my balance is updated, which is now -1. So he's gone actually over 1 hour into the red because we miscoded 1 hour of time, or maybe he just took an extra hour of vacation that he shouldn't have been eligible for. But as you go through here, you notice that you do have opportunity on the next option, or the next example I'm going to show you here for sick leave. And notice on sick leave here, sick leave has has 2 lines. You notice that, and I'll just circle both of them right here. You'll notice that one line actually started on 7/4, the other one, and that one ended on 9/15, and then the new one started on 9/16. What happened here is the initial use of this was done on 7/4. Someone probably used sick leave PTO. System started tracking time on 7/4. But on 9/16, we came around and maybe uploaded, or we told the system via the allocate PTO option at the bottom that we now wanted to load a new balance for that particular PTO type. Whenever you do the allocate PTO, or we go in and mass load those balances for you, the system will end date that same pay type in the system that's already existing and create you a new line. So for some of these that are still in the 2015 range, we can go in there today and go in there and mass load PTO for you guys and go in and it'll automatically start it on maybe January the 1st if no PTO has been used so far this year. So like I mentioned, it's not too late to go in there and do balances if there's something you want to track on the Blue Force system. I do urge you, if you can, have the system track it for you. I know too many of us are, off busy doing many, other jobs, multiple jobs on a given day, and there's one less thing you have to track manually. Let's use the system and get that in there. So that's kind of the PTO section. Everyone does have access to, and kind of a quick refresher. When you go to the employee record, you'll notice that some of the areas that are in orange or have the orange tabs on them, these orange areas are going to be areas that you can view only. You won't be able to go in there and edit. However, these items that are in blue sections or blue tabs, the blue tabs will actually be options that are areas that you can actually go in and actually make some edits, and you have a little more control over. So kind of on the other webinars we've done over the last couple of weeks, I've done the working job. We've talked about PTO. We've talked a little bit about Black Calendar, but not much, but we've talked a little bit about that via the scheduling system. And we've talked about Autosplit on the employee record. So probably next week on next week's webinar, I'm going to bring up the default shift and task to kind of close out that employee record granular security changes. All right, so that's kind of the part on PTO and how that's going to affect you. All right, so the big topic now, work orders, and work orders in Blueforce, and all that good stuff that goes around work orders. So what are work orders? So for those that are on the phone call that may have never heard that term, work orders were simply created and used to track above base, extra, or what we refer to as one-time job work. There are some other terms out there like tag work or specials as well. I think they've been referred to. So we have this is a big industry for everyone on this phone call. So everyone calls it different things, but regardless, work orders basically originate, and they also are initially created in JDE. And I want to stress that because they start in JDE. So that's why if you ever still see something in Blueforce, our standard response to you is going to be, are they set up in JDE? That's the first thing to verify with you. And once they are created in JDE, an interface will send that work order information over to Blueforce, and this occurs within the 30-minute window, which is basically at the top of the hour and at the bottom of the hour. So if you are working along and finish your changes at 9:20 a.m., at 9:30 we have an interface that runs. So at 9:30 it starts running. Within about 5 minutes after that, you should be able to see that in Blueforce. Now once in Blueforce, you'll be able to allocate work time to a work order. So keep in mind, you can't go in there and start allocating time or charging people to a work order until that's actually been created and viewed and accessible by you in Blueforce. Now, the critical field here is the work order start date, because I think 9 out of 10 times when someone calls and says they can't see a work order, it's because that work order start date is incorrect on the work order. And what I mean by that is you can only allocate time to a work order on or after the given start date is entered for that work order in JDE. So if I have a start date on a work order of February the 1st, 2/1, and I'm trying to enter time in the system for January the 23rd, I'm going to have a problem because on January 23rd, that work order did not exist according to that start date. Therefore, the system will not allow me to code time to that work order. So in that scenario, it has to be February the 1st or sooner to be able to code time to that work order. Now, the work order also must be active. In order for you to be able to use it and see it in the system, it has to be active. And it must be corrected in JDE and updated via interface. So if the start date was ever incorrect, we would ask you to get with your JDE contact at their office, whether it be yourself or somebody else, or maybe it's someone here at the corporate office for that ISS team that's on this phone call. Get with that person, have them update that date on that work order in JDE, and then within that 30-minute window, it'll be available and updated for you in Blueforce. So one of the reasons I'm talking about work orders here, because this is also another piece that you have access to seeing in Blueforce. So there are some things I want to go through to make sure we all understand that we can do. So one of the things I want to talk about is troubleshooting. With the use of work orders kind of being heavily used now across the country, one of the things you can do before contacting the ISS help desk for support is you can actually go and then first view the work order in Blueforce. So one of the things you can do now, although you don't have access to edit the work order in Blueforce, you can at least go in there and see if it even exists. So if you can't find it in the system, then it's probably not going to be in there. Secondly, verify that the work order exists. If not, we're going to turn you down the road to go and talk to whoever does the JDE work order setup. Verify that you have the correct number. And what I mean by correct number is the work order number. It's correctly shown as given to you. If not, talk to that person to do the JDE work order setup. We also want you to verify that the work order is active. So the work order is inactive, has been used, has been basically in essence closed or terminated. The work order is still going to reside in Blueforce as an inactive state. So one of the beauties of this lookup that you can go in there and look at all your inactives and see what you did with that work order. So all that kind of information behind that work order is viewable to you in Blueforce. Also, verify that the work order has a start date equal or after the date you are trying to enter / allocate time for. Once again, if the start date is incorrect, we're going to refer you back to JDE. And lastly, verify that the work order is set up to the correct job. And that's one of the things I haven't talked about yet, but each work order, when it gets set up in JD Edwards, it's got a link to a specific job number. So if that job number is inactive in Blueforce, or if that job number doesn't exist in Blueforce, you're not able to see that work order yet either. So keep that in mind. Verify that the work order is set up to the correct job. And once again, as I mentioned a while ago, all editors, submitters, and approvers have the access to verify and run through all of this. So this may be kind of a newsflash to everybody, but you can actually go in there as a editor, submitter, and/or approver to go ahead and view and see all these items. So one of the things I'll show you here in a moment is a work orders icon from the main Blueforce window. It's just a little clipboard top right-hand side of that opening screen. And when you click on that work order icon, you'll be taken to a grid here, which you have the opportunity now to view any of the work orders. And I'll show you this in a live demo momentarily, but you can actually sort these columns any way you like. You can go through and then export this into Excel so you have a listing at your disposal if you need to, at your desk. Or if you want to email this to list to somebody else, you could do that. So one of the big things is a lot of us on this phone call do not have access to JD Edwards. However, with now having access to Blueforce here, I can actually go in there and look up my work orders on my own without having to refer to somebody on the JDE side. The only thing you'll need that person on the JDE side to do is make changes for you as it relates to the dates, for that predominantly the start date and maybe the job assignment. So kind of furthermore with that as well, once I go in to view the actual work order, each work order also gives you the specific job and or task that it's specifically assigned to. So at any point I can go in there and say this work order, which is 107838, is linked to job 5009386. Now keep in mind, if I'm assigning or maybe editing a time card, I'm trying to allocate time to an employee, if I don't have this job 5009386 in my selection criteria to work with that job, or more importantly, the employee doesn't have this work order assigned to his or her working jobs, job number assigned to his or her working jobs, then this work order, 107838, will not be available to be coded to for that employee. So kind of criteria here, just make sure that you obviously selected the job to work with, and second, that the employee is able to work this job under the working jobs. So let me go back to Blueforce, and in Blueforce, show you real quick what the work orders look like. So I'm back from the main screen. When I go to the main screen, work orders is the very top right-hand corner, so it's a little paper, kind of the icon up here at the top right. I'm going to try to circle it here. It's giving me the option. There you go. So there's a little icon up here on the clipboard. So once I go in and click on that clipboard icon, it's going to take me to my grid, and it's going to show me all the work orders that relate to the jobs that I currently have selected to work with. So the jobs I have selected to work with are here on the left-hand side, and there's 5 of them. Those are the 5 jobs I have currently selected to work with, so that's why it's showing me just 20 down the bottom right, if you can see it on your screen. The very far bottom right, it tells you page 1 of 1, items 20. It says I have 20 work orders that belong to these 5 jobs. So I'm seeing all of these. The screen, by default, is only going to show you active work orders. So if you want to look up inactive work orders, you have an option here to change the flag from active to inactive and click search to show your inactive as they relate to, once again, these jobs that you have selected. Now, if I'm going through here right now, we're looking from a view standpoint. I'm not going to allocate a code or anything to the work orders. I'm just viewing the work orders. I can go through here. The way the screen initially works by default, this is work order ID column sorts by that first digit of the number. So when you're looking at it, it looks like the the work order numbers are out of, kind of out of order and out of sync, and it's just simply because that's a, it reads by that first digit. So each of these column headers you can actually click on and sort that particular column by. So if I want to sort by work order description, I have to click on work order description, the little title there. And when I do that, and I'll show you what it looks like. When I do that, the screen may flash a little bit, but then you'll see a little small arrow appear to the right of the description. So right here, you'll see a small arrow. And that's just telling you that it's ordered in a kind of a ascending manner. So that's the point, the up arrow. If I click it again, it'll resort it in a descending manner. So you'll have that option of sorting. You can do that with any of these particular columns. Now, the question that I always get also here from the screen is, on the modified by, why does it have all these different people's names? What's going on there? So whenever someone has gone and made a change to the work order, you will see that person's name listed there. Now, obviously, nobody can make a change in brute force other than an administrator. So if we are administrators, myself and Tian will be the only ones that will be making the changes in brute force. The key thing to keep in mind is you may always see something that says Z Epay or Epay, Z 99999. That is basically our interface that runs. So that's what we call it. So anytime we see that on the record, that's telling me that it's been updated by that interface on the modified date right to the right of there as well. So it tells you the date that it was actually updated in the system. So the key thing about this screen is once I go through this and actually find the work order I want, I can click on that view option on the far left-hand side. And when I click on view, a little snapshot of the work order pops up. And you will quickly be able to see the work order ID. You'll know that it's active. You'll see the description. You'll see when it started on. So keep that in mind. If that start date is not, like I said, it's past the time you want to actually enter time for, you want to make sure that gets corrected in JDE. And that actually tells you the assigned job for that particular work order. And right now, it just basically falls under any task. One of the things we could do is if we wanted to make this work order only available to the custodians and not anybody else at that site, maybe like a day porter, maintenance tech, elevator starter, all the different types of, types we have of positions we have out there in the field, we could actually assign this to a particular task. Now, we're not going to go that route just yet, or I have no plans of doing so, but nevertheless, you can actually code this down to a task level. Now, the other tabs that are on here really aren't going to help us any. You won't be able to do anything here, but you can always assign an employee and assign a particular rate for that particular work order as needed as well. The bottom line, you have the ability to come in here and view the work order as you need to verify that it, A, is set up correctly, B, that it's actually in the system, but more importantly, C, be able to use it on a day-to-day basis. So as a refresher, just as I kept mentioning, is if the work order is all here correctly, and you have verified that the job that's associated with the work order is available to the employee, then when I go into the time card screen and actually try to code that work order to that employee, I will be able to go in here and let me just go in and edit selected time cards. I can actually go in here now to the work order and hit the drop down and see the work orders that are associated to that employee. So like this one, I could use that one and assign it to that particular employee. Now, one thing I will tell you, and I use this one because the good example here, it shows this as U.S. Hangar-Thanksgiving. Something tells me that work order is probably from November, so it's probably not current. The example I used earlier in the previous window had a start date of 2014, so I guarantee you that's probably not current either. One of the things about work orders is I'll stress in JDE, make sure that we go back and close the work orders once we're done. One of the things that we can't have the employees do is clock into a particular work order from a Walter device, from the mobile device, from the web punch, and even the phone system. If we elect to do that for the employee will have a listing as long as all the active work orders in the system. So think about going to the clock and having to scroll through 5 work orders at a time. and you have 500 work orders out there that are still sitting as active. It becomes a pain, becomes really unsuccessful from the employee's perspective of clocking in and clocking out. So just keep that in mind as you go through this particular process. So kind of wrapping up our call today, just want to remind you that we do have other training webinars going on. I didn't update this slide, but we did have a manual timesheet webinar last week. I believe next week we do have a Web Punch webinar on Wednesday at 1 p.m. So those that use Web Punch or would like to know what a Web Punch is and start using that as well, I'll have a webinar on Wednesday at 1 o'clock. And then we'll also have our webinars that we typically do are on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I ask that everyone make an effort to attend one of those two, just to get caught up on our weekly updates and hot topics that we go through on those sessions. Also remember to visit Gateway and keep on top of those weekly updates, but also importantly, visit Gateway so you can actually see all the documentation and links to the webinars. And every session we do, including this one, is recorded. So following this session, I'll upload it to YouTube, and you can go up there and view all the recordings of the webinars again or for the first time. And kind of want to say with that, thank you for joining us today. Like I said, our Epay Tips and Changes webinar is at 2 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and like I said, Web Punch next Wednesday at 1 o'clock. Other than that, I want to say thank you for joining us today. And yes, there are different topics on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So every Tuesday and Thursday, there'll be a different topic every week. So next week we'll have some new topics, and you can read about those in the Epay update going out on Monday. So with that, have a great rest of the week, and we'll catch you again on the webinar next week. Thank you so much.